Okay, so that gave you a lot of time to actually download the apps. Those of you who wanted to do that, we'll be talking about those two apps during the slide. So you'll be able to perhaps during the presentation or later on at home to explore what we've done and what we're really talking about. Okay, so open art and audio movie. Okay, some of you have been to our lab here. This is in Dobra 55. Yes, you can see myself in this contraption that we call a chin rest. This is to stabilize the position of the head while participant is taking part in the experiment, right? So we basically have this nice, comfortable thing. Some of our participants spent 2 hours in this. Well done, some of you are still in the room. And you can see the rest of the project Valentina will be talking about. So this is our new eye tracker, okay? This is Eiling 1000 Plus by SR Research, but we have some more fancy toys. I'm showing this in case anyone wants to cooperate. So I'm just showing what we have, okay? Apart from iLink, right? That's the iLink eye tracker. We also have the SMI eye tracker 250 that has some different capabilities. And we also have on the right-hand side, you can see some software. We've got subtitling software. We've got speech recognition software, and Inquisit is the software to test working memory capacity. If you ever need that, we've got it. In this presentation, I wanted to focus on our research on reading subtitles or watching subtitled films and talk to you about this. You can see 3 screenshots here on the left-hand side. It's a very old screenshot. This TV presenter doesn't work any longer on TV. You can see whenever people are looking at a face, they would focus on the face. This is a heat map, so the redder the area, the more fixations, the more attention is there. The moment subtitles appear, people's attention goes down and they start reading to the point that they don't even look at the face. That's why it's really important that subtitles are readable and we produce them in the best way possible. Another research question we're trying to answer is whether reading subtitles is similar to reading printed text or not. And we've been trying to find some differences and similarities. If you look at this sentence here, it shows you how people read printed text with visualization coming from the eye tracker. So to those of you who are not familiar with what the eye tracker can tell you, we have 2 major eye movements. They are called saccades and fixations. So saccades would be those jumps from one place to another, and fixations would be those circles. And the larger the circle, the longer a person is looking. And despite what you may think, that when we read, we fixate, so we look at every word, we actually don't. If you have a look at this very sentence, this word, I wasn't fixated, or this one, okay, you can see short function words are typically omitted. Okay, that's how we read. So this person was reading "The night attacked the windmill," and then they went back. So they made a regression. So fixation going backwards is called as a regression. So it's like the night attacked the windmill. So something was like, what's wrong, right? So they went back and reread it, and then sort of figure out where it comes from and understood. In many ways, reading subtitles is similar to reading printed text. And you can see the visualization, it's called a scan path here. In order to be able to actually study this, we have to focus on individual words. And that's a visualization from our previous eye tracking study, where we had to draw manually an area of interest. So the place that we want to study on every word, in every subtitle, in every video. That was taking forever. Gabi, if you think what you have to do now is difficult, think about this. Now we are very happy because we have this new eye tracker that automatically, basing on the time codes and the text of the subtitles, does everything for us. Okay, so it's a major step for us. Okay, so how do people read subtitles, and what does it depend on? Okay, so our gaze is modulated by 2 groups of factors. On the one hand, it's the characteristics of the subtitles themselves, right? So whether they are segmented in proper way. Okay, what is proper? I'll say in a second. Whether they are displayed at the right pace, and also obviously on the characteristics of the subtitles themselves, on the words. That was on the one hand, and on the other hand, that depends on who the viewers are. All right, so we've been looking into different viewers depending on their hearing status, and also a little bit into language proficiency. To give you a few examples, gaze changes depending on how subtitles are structured. On the left-hand side, you have a subtitle that is syntactically segmented, okay? So 2 clauses, and each clause is in a separate line. And here we have this article A here at the end of the line. That's bad segmentation, unprofessional, okay? And we found that people fixate a little bit more on non-syntactically segmented subtitles, so the cognitive load is a bit higher, but not substantially higher. When it comes to subtitling speed, an experience some of you may be familiar with when you're reading a subtitle, right? You're reading, and then it just disappears and you haven't finished reading, as you can see in this visualization, okay? This is an frustrating experience, and we're trying to answer the question like how fast is too fast, essentially. Valentina will say more about this. We also found that the higher the speed of the subtitles, the more time people spend on reading them. So as the speed goes up, the time you spend in a subtitle goes up as well. But when it comes to rereading, it's actually the opposite. So the faster the subtitles, the less rereading. Now we can ask whether it's good or bad, and the answer is, of course, it depends who you ask. Moving to individual differences, we studied some groups of deaf and hard of hearing participants, and I have 2 visualizations here to show how reading differs depending on who is reading. On the left-hand side, we have a gaze of a participant who is deaf. So they started at the center of the screen, they went, read the subtitle, went back to the center. Okay, hard of hearing people differ in the sense that they tend to make more jumps between the subtitles and the lip movements. They are comparing using some residual hearing. They're comparing what they can hear with what they can see in the subtitles. And when there are some discrepancies, this is frustrating for them. And when it comes to subtitle characteristics, the probability whether we are going to look at a word or not depends on several factors. Some of them include the frequency of a word. So the less frequent the word, the more likely it is that we're going to look at it. Predictability in the context, okay? The words that are predictable would tend to be skipped. Length, the shorter the word, the less likely it is to be fixated. And then also what type of word is it, whether it's a function word or a lexical word. Okay, so this is what we know from reading studies in general. And we have confirmed some of this on reading subtitles. So for instance, we had this study on word length, and we measured that in syllables. Where's that? You can see this here on syllables. So the longer the word to the right. And that's how hearing people were reading. And the deaf, that's the top line, and hard of hearing is the middle line. Okay, so you can see that hearing people spent less time in the subtitles because they skipped a lot of subtitles because they could hear, so they didn't need to read. And the deaf and hard of hearing people, they looked more at the subtitles. And what's interesting, we found a difference between participants in the way they read function words. So our deaf participants had sign language as first language, and what happened, they were fixating much more at grammatical words compared to hearing and deaf and hard of hearing participants, okay, because of the way I think the Polish Sign Language is structured with function words, etc. Okay, we have a paper on that if you want to look into that. Okay, we also checked reading subtitles on different devices. These are 2. Where's the eye tracker here, by the way? Can you see the eye tracker? So you can see we were testing on an iPhone, an old iPhone, and the iPad. Aga, yes? At the bottom, that's right. That's where the eye tracker is. No, it's actually here. This little panel was a Tobii eye tracker, okay? And the little phone had the worst results, but this study was actually a nightmare to analyze. So I'll just move on. Another study we did was not related to how people process subtitles, but how people produce subtitles. So what we did, we invited translators and subtitling trainees to the lab, and we got this nice eye tracker. It's a SMI mobile eye tracker. We got it for 3 months, and we thought we're going to test it. So we invited people, and what we did, we used screen recording. And we were basically recording how subtitlers translate. So you can see this translator, the yellow lines are basically where is she looking, and she's using EasyTitle subtitling software to produce the translation and the timing. Here we also recorded their key presses and mouse clicks. And just saying this because I know some of you may be interested in this. We found that professionals used many more keyboard shortcuts and clicked less, and their task completion time was much shorter. And we thought that's related. Okay. And finally, the last thing I want to talk about today is the OpenArt app. This is completely non-experimental. So imagine you have a friend who doesn't speak Polish, like Valentina here, right? And you also have a friend who's blind or partially sighted, and we have some friends like this, right? I don't need to mention the name. And we also know some people who are deaf. And let's say we wanted to go to a museum together. That might be an issue, right? Why would that be an issue? Well, I will be able to read those little explanations next to each painting, right? Probably only in Polish. I don't know, Valentina, do they have in the National Museum? Do they have an English description? So that's a language barrier there. For blind people, right? What they would need to do, they would need to download from the website, like an audio description perhaps, and then every audio description takes about, I don't know, 15 to 20 minutes. So they would stand in front of a painting for 20 minutes listening to the description, where everybody else would be in like 2 rooms away, right? And a deaf person sort of, you know, would have to, I don't know, maybe go to a special tour with sign language interpreting. So what we were trying to do in this project, in OpenArt project, was to try to work towards integration and try to make it possible for people to actually go and do things together. And we wanted to create an interesting, I don't know if you've read those descriptions in museums, some of them are not what you would call interesting, okay? So we wanted to create one description that would be interesting for everyone, in the sense that it would be good for people who are sighted and people who are blind at the same time. So incorporate the visual description in this, and then in different language versions, right? In Polish and in English. Of course, you can add more languages, and of course, subtitles for those who need the subtitles, and also with Polish Sign Language interpreting. So those of you who downloaded the app, you can go and explore. You can switch on different options with audio and subtitles and Polish Sign Language interpreting, etc. Not sure if I have the time to show you like 2 minutes of one of the clips that is that we produced. So this is a description from Mocak. The people in Zoom, I don't think you're going to hear this, but there are subtitles. You can see another use for subtitles there. I don't know, have you been to Krakow, to Mocak, the Contemporary Art Museum? It's amazing. It's like one of my absolute favorites. That's why, like, one of the works of art that they have here, and that's a description. While listening, you can have a look at, you can pay attention to how, whether you think it's good or not, whether it would be appropriate for people who are sighted and blind at the same time. Okay, so we're sort of incorporating the description with the rest. Okay, let's see.
Between is an installation by Stan.
Sorry.
Between is an installation by Stanislav Dvorust, a freestanding, closed space measuring 3 by 5 by 4.5 meters with an entryway on one of the walls. All the walls, the floor and the ceiling are white and covered in black letters. They are arranged in vertical columns and horizontal rows, forming a regular grid. Many of the letters are rotated 90 degrees left or right. The selection of letters might at first seem random, but in fact they are all letters that comprise the word między in Polish, which means between. Even though the word is nowhere actually spelled out in full, any Polish-speaking viewer will still perceive its presence. The artist seems to be asking how far an object can be tampered with while still remaining recognizable. The pavilion space can be seen as an attempt to create a physical experience, reflecting the title of the installation. What is important can often be found not so much in things as between them. Between is one of many examples.
Okay, hopefully everybody can hear me now. Yes, so perhaps if you want to discuss any of the things I mentioned, we can go. We can do that after everybody has presented. So I'm giving the power and my fancy pointer to Valentina.
Do I have to wear that?
It's better if I wear it, perhaps. Probably, but I think if you could just stay close, it should be enough.
I'll have to sit down. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to be quick, I hope, last famous words. I will be talking about the Watch Me project, which is the project I am one of the many projects that this amazing lab is running right now and for the following 3 years. And myself and other people in this room are involved with it. So I will be just concentrating on this. I'll say a couple of words about who we are and then something about the project overview as a whole, and then we'll concentrate on the experiment that we're running now. So first of all, in the team, this is an awesome international team. In Poland, there is myself, Agnieszka, whom you just met, and Sonia, who will speak in a moment. In the UK, we also have 2 collaborators, Sharon Black and David Orego Carmona, who are currently collecting data for us at the University of East Anglia. In Australia, there is Jan-Louis Kruger, who is also a collaborator in the project and who actually run one of the studies that we are currently replicating right now. And we also have some awesome external collaborators, but I know whom we are borrowing from the Multilingualism Research Hub, and Krzysztof Krejc, who works as SWPS, right, at the other university in Warsaw. He's a psychologist and the head of the eye tracking lab there. So quite a lot of overlap between our interests. In terms of the Watch Me project, well, there are 4 experiments that will take place over the next 3 years. Currently, we're working on experiment 1, so I'm going to skip that because we will talk about that in much more detail in the next few slides. In experiment 2 and 3, what we are trying to do is assess the independent contribution of adding versus removing sound, right? And what this does to both processing and comprehension of video content. We will be running this study in Poland, the UK, and Australia. The same goes for experiment 3, where we will be looking at subtitle speed. Again, trying to identify whether increasing subtitle speed for the most part will lead to consequences as far as comprehension and processing. So how people read the subtitles and whether they can retain as much information and remember as much information, understand as much information about the content when the speed is higher. And then in experiment 4, which will be, if I'm not mistaken, Sonia's PhD, possibly the most interesting for me as a sort of SLA interested person, experiment of the 4, we're looking at subtitle language, right? So we look at Polish and English, and this will be run in Poland exclusively. So before we look at experiment 1, I just wanted to give a bit of an overview about the project, right? So what are we trying to do in the Watch Me project? We are trying to answer some key research questions. Number 1, how do we read subtitles? And importantly, how reading subtitles differs from reading static text, right? We have a situation where static and text presented in print or or digitally, he's read by readers, which really differs in some substantial ways from the way in which we read the subtitles. Subtitles are dynamic. They don't stand still. They appear and disappear, and the viewer has no control in some situations. Of course, now if we play back and with DVD, you can stop, you can go back, but in situations like film in the cinema or in television, often you can't. You just have to follow this rhythm, right? So the reading patterns and various eye tracking measures may be affected by the nature, the slightly different nature of this dynamic and multimodal reading, especially when we start considering that we also have the images to process, right? Number two, how is this processing of this written text that changes on screen affected by both video characteristics and subtitle parameters? Video characteristics and subtitle parameters that Agnieszka just touched upon earlier. So, you know, whether there is the video there or not, so whether there are the viewing images to look at or not, and whether the audio is there or not. And subtitle parameters, of course, subtitle speed, which is very interesting for us, given, for example, that now Netflix is slow and other VOD providers are slowly increasing the subtitle speeds compared to, say, a decade ago. So it's important to answer these questions. And other subtitle parameters that SLA researchers and psycholinguists in the room, if there are any, will be more familiar with would be word length and frequency as well, right? And then we're also interested in whether individual differences, again, Agnieszka just touched on this earlier, in affect processing. So working memory is something that we're interested in. We're not testing it in experiment 1, but we definitely will in the future experiments. Also L2 proficiency. We work here in Poland with English films and English subtitles, which for a Polish viewer is not their native language. So there is also this element of language proficiency that may play a role, but also things like age, gender, potentially immersive tendency as well. So a host of individual viewer differences that can be taken into account. Key aims of this project is to understand, first of all, how people process subtitle video, right, including learners, to establish how subtitle reading is affected by various manipulations that I have just mentioned. And importantly, and this goes back to what Agnieszka said a minute ago, we want to really provide a methodological toolkit for the AVT, the audiovisual translation researcher, for people who are starting out now. Agnieszka mentioned earlier that one of the breakthroughs, really recent breakthroughs that we have experienced is the introduction of automatic area of interest generation around each and every single subtitle word, right? This is huge for us because up until this point, boxes were drawn around the whole subtitle area, right? Which does not allow us to do any type of meaningful fine-grained analysis. With this breakthrough, basically any questions that the really large field of reading research has asked can now be asked about reading in multimodal context. So this is very exciting. We are amongst the first to do this, and this is why it's also important to have a methodological kit to help other people getting started, right? Obviously, working with eye trackers can be quite tricky in many ways. So not just to sort of, you know, do the studies, run the studies and publish the papers, but also to help other people who want to start, right? Because there's a lot that we can find out now. And also we will address the replication crisis in the social sciences with this first experiment, because we are replicating, we are carrying out direct replication of a study with this experiment 1. The study that we're replicating, you can see, I hope that you can see the slides and still hear me, on the left-hand side. And there's another one that's still on the same data set that has been published. We're working pretty much only exclusively with the first one for now. So the research question here is, does adding the video, so one of our variables is the presence versus absence of the moving images, and does changing subtitle speed influence 2 things? Subtitle reading, so processing related question, and comprehension, understanding of the content of the clip. Based on the published research that we have so far, I expect that both these factors will impact both comprehension and also eye movements. So they might be able to predict where people look and how people read, right? And we also think that in the Polish context, we have English learners of English as a foreign language, Polish native speakers. So we expect that L2 proficiency may also have an effect both on reading measures and on comprehension, but we we'll see when we analyze the data. So sorry for the slightly cluttered slide. I think that less is more doesn't apply when we talk about method. More is more. So the more information I give you, the better you will be enabled to understand how the design of the study worked. So we had a 2x3 within participant design with 6 conditions and 6 clips. There was no audio throughout, right? We want to remove the potential confounding effect of the audio. So this is totally invalid from an ecological perspective, but from an experimental perspective, it ensures that we don't have the confound of sound. And then as far as the video is concerned, 3 videos were presented with the moving images and 3 were presented without the moving images. What this means, de facto, is that for half of the clips that the participants watched, and some of the participants I can see in this room, so you will know what I'm talking about, were basically staring at the black screen with no audio, no video, just subtitles. Nothing that would ever happen in normal life, but you know, this is a starting point, right, as a baseline to understand what just adding the video and changing subtitle speed may do. The subtitles were in English on an English clip. They were all one-liners. There were 42 Polish native speakers of a fairly high, I would say, B2 and plus level of English, who were, and this is key for us, potentially used to reading subtitles, right? We used 2 eye trackers, one here in Poland, the chin rest that Agnieszka showed you earlier in that picture of the lab. And then there's also a portable duo, which is used for remote tracking. So you don't need to put your head into this contraption. You have a sticker, a target sticker that you put on the forehead, and that helps the eye tracker track your eye movements, and you can, you know, move around a little bit. And this is used currently right now in the UK. The participants took questionnaires right after each clip. So clip, then questionnaire, clip, then questionnaire, then a break, and a break every 2 clips. Otherwise, people would fall asleep, given that, you know, some of the conditions weren't the most interesting. There's no video and no audio. The MCQs, the multiple choice questions, were 8 per clip, and they always had 3 possible answers. The eye tracking measures, and this sort of comes more to the meaty part, were of 2 types. We ran global analysis, and you can see the eye movements that we analyzed there, and word level analysis. And I'll show you in a second what this means, right? And then we analyzed data in R using generalized linear mixed effect models. So what does it mean with this sort of global analysis versus the word level analysis, where this is what the global analysis sort of look like, in the sense these are the areas that we look at eye movements for. So this is the video macro area, as you can see here, and this is the area of interest around the subtitle, right? This is how it was done until this point. This is what we can do now. Right, so these areas of interest are automatically generated by the software, which is really great for us and allows us to then zoom in on the subtitles and to see how subtitles are actually read at the word level. Okay, so let's look at some results. I tend to speak too much and too fast. So in the interest of time and you understanding, I'm just going to concentrate on some parts of these graphs, but please do feel free to ask, and we can go back to these and look at the other panels as well, because they're all really interesting. Here, I decided to look at the total number of fixations. I mean, in average fixation duration, things change a little bit, but so here you can see that, so the black lines versus the gray lines. The black lines are the subtitles, right? With the solid line is when the video was not there, and with the dotted line is when the video was there. But these are fixations on the subtitles versus fixation on the video area. Very clear differences. This is 2 lines are much higher on the graph than this. What this means is that when the subtitles are there, people look at them. This seems obvious, but there have been hypothesis postulated in the future to say that, especially if you know the language, or if you don't know the language at all, for example, then you won't read the subtitles. Well, that is not true. There's something called automatic reading behavior. Even if I give you subtitles in a language that you don't even understand the script of, Chinese, Arabic, Russian, your eyes will still be drawn there to the subtitle, right? So people do read, perhaps because this is something that appears and disappears. It could be the movement element, but people do read the subtitles, and they split their attention and they devote less attention to the video. Whether the video is there or not, this matters less in this particular case. But of course, if the video is not there, then the total number of fixations on the subtitles will be higher because there is no video to look at. The moment we add the video, still this line sort of is lower than this, so the fixation number decreases, but people are still looking at the subtitles. Also, this line in these two graphs, this gray solid line, represents fixations on the video when there is no video, and logically and rationally is the lowest, right? Because there is nothing that interesting to look at. So so this is sort of proves that subtitles are read. Then in terms of the word level analysis, so we only look at the subtitles word by word, we looked, well, this is the original result, they looked at frequency of the words and length of the words, right? And what they found really nicely confirms the finding of reading research for static text. So when where is my pointer? When length increases, so as the letters, there's more letters in a word, look at what all the lines to less or more extent also grow, right? So the longer a word, the more it is fixated, the more the total time increase, right? And this makes sense because if the word is longer, there are more chances of people reading it, right? And we know from reading research, we can also look at we also looked at the frequency, and again, very nicely replicating results that we find in reading research. This is the situation is inverted, right? So there's a inversely proportional relationship. As the frequency of the word increases, the total times decrease. Remember what Agnieszka said earlier about small short function words being completely skipped, right? We had that nice slide where the word the and a preposition at the end was towards the end were skipped. Well, really frequent words, which like prepositions or the verb to be, are generally completely skipped, right? And this will decrease the total time. So although again, this seems like, okay, well, we already know this, but we didn't. We now know that actually starting from the tenets of reading research of static text is certainly a good place to start, right? In looking, in making assumptions as to what might be going on in this slightly different situation. I don't know if I have that much time, but I did want to maybe touch about on a wrap-up effect. So this is still part of the word level analysis. What is the wrap-up effect? So normally when we read in traditional print reading, even if you control for things like word frequency or in word length, and then you look at the durations of the fixations on words that happen at the beginning, at the middle, and at the end of a line, of a sentence, words that are at the end of the sentence tend to have longer fixation associated with them, right? Even after controlling for all these factors. Why would this be? So the reason that, well, the reason that has been postulated in the reading literature is that these sort of longer fixation times on sentence final words are basically an index of post-lexical integration. What does this mean? It means that, I mean, what we do when we read is, of course, we need to perceive the word, right? So our eyes need to physically, if not going on the word, at least being able to perceive the word thanks to our peripheral vision, right? But we don't stop there, right? We also need to do some sort of integration, especially after we started reading the first sentence. We will have all this context into which we need to integrate the current sentence, right? So in normal reading of print text, this is what has been found. And in subtitles, when the video is absent, particularly here, you can see it very clearly. Look, words at the end receive longer fixations than words elsewhere in the sentence. This says middle here, but actually what they did is middle and beginning. Look what happens when we increase the speed. So we go from 12 to 20, and then with 28 CPS, even when there's no video to look at, we have what is called a reverse wrap-up effect, right? So this doesn't happen. And the most sort of intuitive reason why this does not happen is that 28 CPS characters per second is so fast that actually people do not get to the end of the sentence, right? So this integration of meaning, this turning of the linguistic representation of a word into its propositional representation cannot happen, and this may have consequences for comprehension. And you can see there in the processing, this is even more visible when the video is there, right? Then we don't even have this inversion. It's the words at the end of the sentence aren't fixated for longer because there is so much more going on, including the video, especially when the speed increases, okay? So just to summarize, the original study found that adding the video and changing subtitle speed has significant effects pretty much throughout the analysis. That comprehension was higher with video content. So video actually, contrary to what some postulated, does increase comprehension, so it helps, but comprehension accuracy declined as the speed increased, right, especially at 28. Also, as speed increased, participants did prioritize subtitle reading. We saw that in that first slide where the subtitles were much higher on the graph, and there were also fewer crossover saccades, right? When the subtitles are there, especially if the speed increases, there's no time to go back to the video. And then they found what I've just described, this reverse wrap-up effect, especially when there was video and at the hardest speed to cope with. And then they talk about this quite interesting, and this will need some more studies to actually prove, but they interpret this as a shift from making decisions about whether to skip a word or not, whether to fixate a word or not, being based only on the properties of the words, if the word is long, if the word is frequent, for example, shifting, however, towards these more global heuristics, right, which are dictated by global task demands, like the presence of changing subtitle speeds. If that enters the equation, there is no longer word frequency and word length that affect this decision. There are made programmatic saccade programming is not affected only by the properties of the words, but it becomes to be affected also by these sort of global task demands. Okay, I will stop here. I just wanted to show you a couple of visualizations. This is just a still of all the fixations made by one participant in this clip, and you can see how, you know, they're definitely being read into subtitles. Another thing to say is the diameter of these circles which represent the fixation is proportional to the time they took, right? So this fixation here was much longer than this fixation here, okay? And then I just wanted to show you a really short clip from our study, so some of the participants will recognize this, just to show you, is it gonna work? Yes, can you see it? I hope so. So, you know, here you can see how the participants keep doing this crossover, right? Saccades, so from the video to the subtitle. Obviously, sometimes there are no subtitles, so the people will concentrate on the video, and then when the subtitles appears, there is, you know, this very quick movement down. So just, and then you can see the two eyes. So we recorded eye data binocularly, so you can see that. And then the last thing I will show, oops, is this. I mean, Agnieszka also has already showed you heat maps, they are called. I don't really like them. I think they're the least informative of all visualizations, but they look fancy. And so here they are. Okay, I will stop here and pass the word to, I think, Sonia or Gabby? No, to Gabby. Okay.
Okay, so switching gears from subtitling to dubbing, I'm going to talk to you about a new project that we are just starting that deals with audiovisual speech processing in dubbing. So before we talk about the project itself, I think it's important to have like some ground level understanding of dubbing. I'm sure you know what it is, but to put it in a more academic context, I would like to focus your attention on this definition by Luiken, where he emphasizes that dubbing is not only a change in the voice track, which you may associate with dubbing when you think about it, but it also attempts to reproduce the timing, phrasing, and lip movements of the original. And this will come very important in a second, so please remember this part. Why is it so important? Well, when you are someone who does dubbing, you have to concentrate on many different things at once. These are called the synchronies in dubbing. So first one, the most obvious one probably is a phonetic synchrony or lip sync. So the lip movements of the character should be somehow congruent with what is being said in the translation, right? Second of all, if you can see the person talking, well, if you're lucky, you can, for example, only see the back of their head, but that's not very common. So if you can see the person talking, the character talking, the length of the utterance should be congruent with the length of the translation, right? Sorry to people on Zoom, I apparently touched the mic. Right. So the length of the utterance has to be congruent with what you see on the screen, right? And then there's also something called kinesic or kinetic synchrony, depending on who you read, which deals with movements and gestures. So imagine I'm a character in a film and I'm speaking English. So if I do something like that, I'm shaking my head for the people on Zoom, and I say no, you probably will not dub that into yes in Polish, right? Because it would be weird in our Western context, okay? So having all that in mind, dubbing is a mode of audiovisual translation. So it is a translation. So you also have to remember about the content. Okay. Lip movements, probably one of the most important types of synchronies. I'm sure you know, but some lip movements or some vowels are produced, some sounds, basically phonemes, are produced in a way that is more obvious than others, right? And these are mainly open vowels. So when your mouth is very open, when you're making a sound, for example, open A, like ah, or open O, right? It's very visible. You can try, you can try doing that. Like your lips are very open and it's easy to tell what sound is being made, right? And then like on the other side of the spectrum, you have bilabial and labial consonants such as P, B, M, and we are also using W in this experiment, where your lips are very either closed or very close together. Once again, a very distinctive lip movement. Okay. So now, what is audiovisual speech processing? I'm going to use an anecdote from my life to explain this to you. I remember when I got into the PhD program at our university, I, of course, had to give them papers, printed out papers, personally signed with my hand, and give it to them in their main office. Back then, their main office was in Krakowskie Przedmieście Street with the historic cobblestone kind of thing, road, one might say. And I remember that it was either June or July, very hot day. I decided to do that. So the ladies in the office had their doors open, right, for some air movement, I'm guessing. But it was also 2020, first year after COVID, so we were all wearing masks inside, pretty much as you are now. And for added security, there was a plexiglass. Oh, sorry. There was a plexiglass between me and the lady that was taking my papers. Again, the door was open. And you think that Krakowskie Przedmieście is not a busy street because it can only be, I think, buses and taxis that go in there, right? But yet, with the sound the wheels were making on this like cobblestone road, it was quite loud. So what happened was that I could not understand what the lady was telling me. Like we were both wearing masks. There was a plexiglass, and I was sitting near the open door and could hear all the traffic behind me, right? So even though her lips were covered, like I couldn't see anything, I was religiously looking in the spot where her lips should be, because I was so desperate to try to understand anything, because the auditory channel was not clear. So this is audiovisual speech processing. How much both, yeah, how much I struggle, no, but how much auditory and visual cues, how big of a role they both play in our understanding of speech, right? Okay. Now, to illustrate how important both of these aspects are, I'm going to tell you about probably, I'm sure you've heard about the McGurk effect. It's probably the most well-known audiovisual speech perception study. But just to make it clear for everybody, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't even remember what their initial goal was. But what they did was that they had someone speaking, they recorded someone speaking syllables very, very clearly, and then they dubbed this person, and it was either congruent, so you could see the same syllable and hear the same syllable, or incongruent. So you could see a different syllable and hear something different, right? And what happened was, at the very beginning, I think they blamed their technician for this, saying that he must have dubbed one of the videos wrong, because what happened was that when participants saw someone saying ba, but heard ga in their headphones, they could see and hear someone saying da. So you can see how strong it is that the whole research team blamed the poor technician guy because they were so sure that it wasn't something like, it wasn't an effect, right? But it was the audio was simply wrong, right? Okay. Now, why I am telling you this when I'm talking about dubbing? Well, as you might have guessed, in dubbing, most of the sounds are incongruent, right? So what you can see on the screen, most of the time, you can hear something different, right? Okay. In dubbing, we also have something called the dubbing effect. This was it in 2021 or 2020? Yes. So in 2021, sorry, everyone, one of Spanish researchers, Pablo Romero Fresco, found an effect in Spanish viewers. By the way, Spain is one of the countries where dubbing is very popular. So everything is dubbed. Human movies with like live actors are also dubbed, right? As opposed to what we have in Poland when we mainly dub animations, right? He found that viewers, normally when you watch a movie and someone is speaking, how you would watch it is, let's say about 70% of your time would be spent on the person's eyes in our Western context, because again, this differs in different cultures. And about 30% would be spent on the mouth, mainly when the person is talking, right? This is how you would view dynamic images, like just watch a normal movie in your native language. But what happened in this case, in the case of people watching a movie, an English movie dubbed into Spanish, was that they were subconsciously avoiding looking at the character's mouth. So it ended up like the ratio ended up being like 95% of the time on eyes and only 5% on mouth. I think Romero Fresco hypothesized that it was because they were trying to get immersed. So they were just not looking at the mouth because it wasn't congruent, right? What I think is that perhaps they could not get any information from the lip movements, so they were just not used to looking at it when watching dubbed films, right? Again, something that has to do with how we process or perceive speech. Okay. So I told you why synchronies are so important, why lip movements and whether they're congruent or incongruent in dubbing are also important. So now I want to ask if we have any Spanish speakers here. I don't know if Zoom will be able to hear this. Okay, so I'm just gonna play this clip to you and tell me what you think about dubbing. This is obviously Tom Hanks, right? This is an excerpt from Forrest Gump. And this is the Spanish dubbing. Okay, so I'm gonna play this to you. Switch off the headset. Okay. So that we can hear. Can I just do this, like switch the microphone?
Maybe, yeah. Control.
No.
Because you hear it on the headphones. It's Teraz wybierz może faktycznie.
A, okej, wezmę mikrofon, a nie głośno.
Tak jak w systemie, nie wiem.
For this. Wyjmę teraz.
teraz.
Está muy bien.
Pero
El pequeño Forrest está muy bien.
pero
Muy pronto volverá al colegio. El pequeño Forrest. Tenía razón. Jenny. Yo no sé si mamá tenía razón o si la tiene el teniente Dan. Yo no sé si todos tenemos un destino o si estamos flotando casualmente como en una brisa. Pero yo creo que pueden ser ambas. Puede que ambas estén ocurriendo al mismo tiempo.
Okay, so I think that's enough. What did you think about dubbing? How would you rate it? Okay. But having, like, keeping in mind the synchronization aspect, how do you think they did?
It's very difficult to say, because we can't see or hear anything, but it seemed to me that at least when he was pausing on the mouth, the audio was following that. I don't know about hearing when he actually spoke, because I had no idea what was being said, and I couldn't see the lips, so that's hard to, but at least when he stopped, so it seemed to be synchronous at least.
And I think like the number of movements, I say these mouth flaps seem to be pretty consistent, but the shape, like the lip synchrony, I'm not sure because of how dark the screen was and how poorly I could hear him. So.
Yeah, see, like I had a different idea for this segment. I wanted you to tell me that it was all perfect or flawless, because that's the name of the company that produced this fragment. And this is not a normal dubbing. This was dubbing that was made by professionals, and this was the original continental Spanish dubbing that you can find on Netflix, for example. But what they did is that using AI, they took this already existing film that it's been almost 20 years since Forrest Gump was created, right? So they took this movie, they took the dubbing, and using AI, they changed the lip movements to match perfectly to the translation. So I'm sure you all know what a deep fake is. Yes, they modified the video. So if you can search for it, or I can send it to you later on. and you will see that suddenly Tom Hanks speaks perfect Spanish. Some might say. So I know that I am pretty sure you all know what a deepfake is, and I just wanted you to be aware that now this technology is being used in dubbing. Yeah, not only for porn, that's fair. Okay, so now giving the floor to Sonia.
Yes.
All right, so hello everyone. I'm the last person who's going to be speaking today, so no more of us is going to be sitting here. Hello, Zoom. I hope you can hear me. My name is Sonia Shkriba. I'm also a part of the AVT Lab and of our amazing project, the Watch Me project. But we've already discussed the project at length, so I will not add anything to it. What I will be talking instead, and I'm going to try to be brief because we already are running out of time. I will be talking about my very small contribution to AVT Lab. I hope in the future this contribution may grow, but for now it's just very, very small. And I will be talking about those very happy senior citizens, or maybe older adults would be better term to use in here. So we talked about dubbing a few seconds ago. We talked about subtitle processing. Here I would like to talk a little bit more about media accessibility and what we think about when we imagine media accessibility. We usually mean the blind and partially sighted, or the deaf and hard of hearing. So in general, people with disabilities or some kind of impairments. But there is a whole other group that also needs some kind of specific accessibility services to be able to access culture, to be able to access, for example, films in the cinema. And that was my MA project. So the background for this is that in general in audiovisual translation research, we don't really focus about this age group. We usually study younger audiences, adult audiences. We don't really think that much about older adults. And also, which is very important in the Polish context, the majority of the films are subtitled in the cinemas, as opposed to the television, which usually uses voiceover because it's much cheaper than dubbing, for example. So we are used to voiceover on Polish television, but when we go to the cinema, we have dubbing for animated videos, for animated films, and we have subtitles for the rest of foreign releases, which may constitute a problem for older adults who experience, for example, age-related cognitive and sensory declines. So they may have they may experience some visual vision loss or hearing loss, which might be problematic while reading, while processing subtitles, and might be just discouraging for them. They wouldn't like to go to the cinema anymore, so they are not able to access culture the same as everyone else, because they are not given a proper way of translation that they prefer. And so what we wanted to see is that maybe an accessibility application, in this case, audio movie that Agnieszka mentioned at the beginning, maybe this application might be useful to older adults in the cinema. And yeah, we're interested in finding out whether that would be helpful. So the application itself was created with the blind and partially sighted people in mind. And what it does, it provides
let's just say, an alternative version for them to listen to during a screening. So they can access a movie via audio description if it's a Polish movie, or if it's a foreign movie, they need a combination of audio description and audio subtitles, which in the Polish context is just the text from subtitles recorded by a voice talent. So it is very similar to the voiceover that we know from television. And yeah, we know that older adults might prefer the oral translation while watching films. So we wanted to see whether audio movie would be useful in here. And the main outcomes, just very briefly, from our focus group discussion was that this kind of solution would be good for fast-paced movies, fast-paced films, because they have a lot of dialogue and subtitles usually tend to change very quick. So in those kind of situations, older adults would prefer oral translation provided in the application. And for example, we learned that senior citizens would be very keen on using this application in the cinema, but they still need technical assistance because they are not so technology savvy. So that might be problematic sometimes, but in general, they were very excited about this. And yeah, another thing that we learned is that they are very afraid that this kind of fancy technological solution might increase the price of cinema tickets. So it won't, but they need this kind of assurance. So just a couple of quotations from the participants. And just by the way, if we're talking about media accessibility, now this presentation, to be fully accessible, I should be reading everything that's in here for people who are blind and partially sighted, and so that they could access the presentation. But I'm not doing this, I'm sorry. So I'm not, this presentation is not fully accessible. In here, one of the participants said that usually I think it was he, doesn't mind watching films with subtitles, but they have to be slow. And the minute the dialogues or the subtitles start changing really fast, then it's really difficult to keep up with the subtitles. So that's where we need a voiceover translation, because it's easier to process. We also found out that they are usually discouraged when they see that the film they want to watch is provided with subtitling. So they usually opt for some kind of other activities. So they are discouraged from going to the cinema, and we don't want that. We want people to access culture whenever they want. So we don't want them to just sit at home and watch television if they don't want to do that. Yeah, they wouldn't like, it's too tiring for them to concentrate on reading. They said that if I'm going to have to read, I would like to stay at home and read a book, right? Instead of watching a film in the cinema. So we don't want that as well. We figured that maybe there's going to be a little bit of a problem with headphones, because when you use the application in the cinema, of course, you have to play the translation on your phone and listen to it using the headphones. So maybe some older adults who wear hearing aids might have some problems with that. And there was one participant who complained that she would have to take the hearing aid off and put on the headphones, and that would be problematic. But other participants said there wouldn't be a problem. I'll just take it off and put it in my pocket. So it depends on the person. But this, of course, is something that we have to think about. And I already said that this kind of solution wouldn't cost more, wouldn't cost older adults more, but they are very concerned that it could. So this is really important to inform them that this is not the case. Very briefly, the conclusions. In general, the participants really wanted to, were really keen on trying this, using this solution in the cinema. They said it would be very useful for fast-paced films where it is not possible for them anymore to keep up with the subtitles. God, what was that? Okay. Yes, we know that technology might be an issue for older adults, but as long as they consider it useful, which in this case they did, because they saw they could benefit from this kind of solution. So in this case, they really wanted to try and learn how to use it. This was very important that senior citizens or older adults could be included in the group of users of access services. So any other kind of services for the blind or for the deaf and hard of hearing. So thanks to this, those kind of services would be more interesting to, for example, cinema owners, and basically they would be developed and maybe more money would be devoted to those kind of services, and everyone else could benefit as well. So thank you. That was my study. Any questions?